Hi, and welcome to You, Me, Web3 of Lab 51. Today, we're taking a perspective going far into the East because we have an expert from there with Ken Ip, who's joining us today. Welcome to the podcast, Ken.
Hello, Mark, and thank you for having me on the show today. And a big hello to all the viewers out there as well. My name is Ken. I guess I don't want to spend too much time on myself, but perhaps a little bit background might be helpful for the viewers out there. I guess my story is fairly simple, you would say. My background is in branding and marketing. But these days, as you know, right, it seems everyone claims they do marketing and branding. So instead, I like to tell people that I'm kind of like semi-retired now, but with a deep fascination and what I like to call the new ABCDs in business, which are AI, blockchain, cloud, and data. Currently, I'm an assistant professor in business technologies and also representing today the chairman of the Asia Market Society. And during the day, I also wear a number of different hats. So, for example, at a corporate level, I'm currently sitting on the board in several businesses and organizations, including several universities. And I'm also a strategic advisor for Neverland, which is a Web3 focused venture capital firm with a portfolio value at around 75 million US dollars. And on a personal level, I enjoy reading and writing and have published a few books, two of them called Life Hacks and Growth Hacks. I'm also one of the very few people in Hong Kong who has the privilege of writing newspaper columns for both local Chinese and local newspapers in Hong Kong, which is my hometown, where I'm from. And academically, as a research professor, I'm currently engaged in multiple research projects centered around AI and Web3, including one that explores the concepts of the metaverse.
That's awesome. I think it really sets the stage in terms of an expert who really understands and is embedded in the entire ecosystem because whatever is being built in AI and also in blockchain technologies is rooted in a larger context. And maybe just expanding on that topic of the context, because we're looking at the one end at the technological framework, we're looking at the legal, regulatory framework in different regions, and then the actual applications. If I'm looking at those three layers in that sense, and in a certain way, the U.S., Europe, and Asia, if you take those as regions, have different speeds at which they develop those individual layers. Think about the regulatory framework, for instance, but also in terms of AI funding, AI research, so the foundation which is being built. And maybe to expand on that point, you feel like the last 10, 20 years, we obviously have been dominated mainly by US companies and only recently more by Asian companies, which have been leading the race in AI. How do you see this play out over time with all these AI technologies being developed? Obviously, OpenAI being one prevalent one right now. How do you see them expand? How do you see them take footing in day-to-day life? And then maybe after that, we can also shift into talking about blockchain, which is not the same thing, obviously, but it
Mhm.
is in a related field.
I think that's a really interesting question, Mark. Maybe I'll use the example of DeFi as an example within the areas of AI and Web3 to illustrate my example in terms of the difference between how it is being applied across Asia and Europe. So you've touched on a very good point about the regulatory landscape. I think regulations around, let's take DeFi, I think varies quite a bit between continents. I mean, over in the West, especially I think, especially Europe, right, tends to have a more cautious approach with stricter regulations in place. So this might, you know, in relatively speaking, right, slow down the adoption of cutting edge AI solutions in DeFi for the European markets. But on the other hand, if you think of some of the Asian countries, like Singapore or Hong Kong as well, it's slowly catching up. They might be more open to innovation, particularly or potentially creating a more fertile ground for experimentation with things like AI and DeFi. And also the main differences, I would say it's the focus area. Um, Again, using DeFi, for example, I think in Asia, with its booming things like mobile phone market or with e-payment, right, we might see a stronger focus on AI-powered mobile apps for DeFi services. This could make DeFi more accessible to the large savvy population or big population in Asia. Whereas meanwhile in Europe or even in the States, yeah, with a lot of these established financial institutions, we might see AI being used more for integrated DeFi with traditional banking and financial systems, kind of creating a bridge between the two worlds. And lastly, I think the main difference is lies in the underlying infrastructure, I would say. So Asia has been, as many of you know in the West, has been rapidly developing in its technological infrastructure, and many countries are now boosting, 5G or high-speed internet with advanced cloud computing capabilities. So this strong foundation, in my opinion, would and could accelerate the adoption of AI solutions, especially for DeFi in Asia. However, I suppose, let's say in Europe, with its established, but sometimes I would say less uniform infrastructure, they might need to invest more in this area to kind of fully unlock the potential of AI in DeFi. So I think it's important to remember that these are just, some potential differences. The reality, in my opinion, is that both Asia and Europe or in the West as well, and the States as well, are showing great promises in using these, or especially AI, to enhance DeFi. I think it will be very exciting to see how these trends will continue to unfold.
I think you're absolutely right with that we'll have those differences also going forward, which I think are also rooted in the different mentalities. I think mentality and how culture adopts and responds to new things like technology is also a big part in there. And that leads me to another question, which is around the question of safety. Because obviously using AI, we rely on machines delivering certain output. And obviously you can take the example of China, where you have I don't know how it's called, the social points or something like that, which is often AI driven.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you see, not maybe in a personal application, but in blockchain, how do you see the role of AI in there to improve the safety and certainly also the trustworthiness of transactions?
I don't know whether you would think I'm not answering your questions directly, but here's my attempt, right? I think when it comes to security and trust in blockchain, it's AI. I think it's a bit of double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can be a very powerful friend and ally. So imagine AI working as a tireless security guard, 24/7, constantly monitoring the blockchain for any types of suspicious activity. These tools can sniff out any potential fraud attempts in real time, flagging any transactions that may seem fishy. So this proactive approach can seriously boost the overall security of the blockchain ecosystem. But then the flip side, so what's the flip side then? In my opinion, right? At this very moment, I still believe AI systems themselves can still be hacked. There are many bad actors out there. If bad actors manage to crack into an AI tool, they can potentially use it to launch attacks on different blockchains. A couple of years ago, right, Ethereum, someone stole billions of dollars into the Ethereum network. That's a very prevalent example by that hacking. And also another aspect would be the algorithm. A lot of people, especially scientists, are talking about, algorithms, they're always biased, right? Especially with the data that we're being used to train the AI models. It's biased, It could lead to many types of, how should I call it, unfair, or sometimes even to a point where it's discriminatory outcomes in blockchain transactions. Maybe we might exclude certain minorities from that as a result, which completely defeats the purpose of Web3, which is decentralized. So I think we need to be careful about the data we feed these AI tools. So I guess the key takeaway is that AI has the potential to be a game changer for security and trust in blockchain. But we also need to be mindful of the potential risks. It's all about using AI responsibly with the right safeguards in place.
I have a side question. Do you already know some projects that do that?
I think to a large extent, everyone claims that they are trying to work on an AI algorithm that is ethical and unbiased. But I always say this, right? Imagine an algorithm as a recipe, like a cooking recipe. If the cooking recipe uses biased ingredients, like spices from a particular region, right? The final dish will be biased too. So this is how algorithms can inherit bias from the data they're being trained on. But if the recipe itself is fair, even if it's fair, it might still favor certain ingredients over others. So this can happen in algorithm tools, right? Due to individuals or humans decision process. Think of it like giving more weight to certain spices in the recipe. So defining fairness is also very tricky. It's like deciding what spices will make a dish tasty or delicious. Because what one person like or what one chef likes, another might hate. So algorithms, in theory, need to consider many different viewpoints, just like a good cook considers different tastes. But many scientists or now businesses, private sectors are claiming they're working on ways to remove bias from these ingredients by designing fairer recipes, algorithms, and involved a lot more diverse people in the cooking process, which is like the development. But I think it's an ongoing effort, but I believe slowly we are making good progress.
What I like about the analogy of choosing recipes is because it has this sort of cultural component in there. You can read that into it, that you have different recipes, different ingredients in different regions. And also that we actually need to look closer and look what's happening under the hood, and not one size fits all. Because
Absolutely.
what we deem important in one region or for one person might differ from other people or other cultural contexts, other regions in that sense. However, there's also another aspect in there, which is maybe part of the future also in a regulatory sense, which is we need some sort of white box approach to AI. Because right now, most of the AI is black box. And having the black box obviously puts us in a certain way at risk, because then we need to fully trust the entities developing the AI, which obviously when it goes to transactions and finance, you might want some additional security and trustworthiness baked into the system, and the white box approach might help there. Because regulatory alone is not always sufficient. And I think for widespread adoption of the population to believe that they can trust AI, there needs to be additional guardrails, and one of them might be more transparency. How do you see that?
Absolutely. And also, maybe I'll reframe your question slightly. I think the way I see it is that AI, it's like a supercharged engine that can take blockchain technology to the next level. And I think there are some fantastic ways that these two forces are coming together. So, for example, let's take smart contract or smart contract auditing in particular, because blockchain relies heavily on smart contracts, right? So, which are essentially I call self-executing agreements. So, what is the problem then? So the problem is even a tiny bug in a smart contract can lead to big problems and financial losses. So this is where AI can come in, right? AI powered tools can be developed to, let's say, meticulously analyze these contracts or sniffing out any vulnerabilities before they would cause a big chaos. So imagine this is like an extra layer of security, ensuring there's smooth operation of these digital agreements. And also similarly, in fraud detection and security enhancement, I know most of us believe blockchain is known for its security, right? But as I've mentioned, bad actors are always looking for ways to exploit any weaknesses. So this is where, again, enter AI. So earlier I mentioned algorithms, right? I think machine learning algorithms can be trained on massive data sets of past attacks, which can allow them to identify and flag suspicious activity on the blockchain in real time. Again, I think this is a very proactive approach which can significantly improve the overall security and transparency of the ecosystem. And then there's also data analysis and scalability. That's always been a problem. As we all know, right, blockchain networks, like any other networks, right, generate a lot of data. So which means AI can also step in to analyze this data to identify any recurring patterns and trends, and helping developers to optimize the blockchain systems for better scalability. So think of it as a fine-tuning the engine, right? Ensuring the network can handle a lot more transactions efficiently. Then lastly, I think very important aspect that a lot of blockchain developers have neglected, it's the user experience or improving the user experience. I think right now, as most of us will agree, right, especially laymen, right, interacting with blockchain can be a bit technical. So I believe AI can help step in to bridge the gap by developing a more user-friendly interfaces or even chatbots that can guide all the laymen and users through these complex processes. So imagine like a smooth and intuitive experience making the blockchain more accessible for everyone. I mean, these are just a couple of examples, Mark, where I think the potential of AI and blockchain, there's very vast and it's constantly evolving.
I think it's an important point you're touching on, which is the user experience still is lacking in many ways. And it's actually surprising, given the time we've had in blockchain development, that the user experience is still lacking. It's more of a hindrance for the technology, because it also doesn't create trust if people don't know exactly how to navigate the landscape. Do you think that the advent, and maybe I'm here taking a tangent, the advent of CBDCs will change that aspect? Because obviously, with governments having a stake in the game, there might be more interest or more support to create more standards in user interface, in usability, etc. We saw that in many ways in the past when things have been regulated. Suddenly, there are standards which establish themselves. Do you see something similar happening to the blockchain, maybe powered by CBDCs, or do you see CBDCs not necessarily as helping the blockchain itself?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say, well, the beauty of Web3, it's decentralization, or meaning that there's no one single power entity or ownership of the community, right? I think the main problem right now lies in, I think maybe it's a term your users may or may not be familiar with, but it's a term called interoperability, right? So we need to really break down the walls. Right now, there are lots of different blockchains, but they're like a wall gardens. They're not basically talking to each other. So I think the next step, right, there could be a rise of interoperable blockchains, allowing them to seamlessly communicate and share data. So imagine a world where data can flow freely between different blockchain and networks. That will unlock even greater potential for innovation and for the users. I think that's the main problem.
I have a question. We talking a lot about interoperability between the different blockchains, but the question is, was there already any steps done to achieve it, at least some?
That is a $1 million question. I think the main two networks at the moment, whether it's Ethereum or even Bitcoin, right? There are lots of improvement or upgrades that's been happening. So, for example, ETH has recently gone through another upgrade called Deacon, right? It's all to help with things like transparency, efficiency, in some ways interoperability, as well as scalability, right? Which is another biggest challenges for blockchain scalability. Because many networks are now getting bogged down with high transaction volumes. So I think the future might see the development of new scaling solutions that can handle massive increase in transaction without compromising security and speed. So I think that might be a way for these big or major mainstream blockchain networks to be more compatible with each other.
With that, thank you all for watching. This was You, Me, Web3 of Lab 51. Stay tuned and have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.